Dear students, welcome to lecture 1 of week 6. Week 6 is dedicated to understand risk and quality in export orders. In this lecture, we are going to deal with risk factors in export order processing. Let us begin the journey. Let us first of all go through the contents of today's discussion. We will be first talking about the brief introduction as well as the concept of export risk. After that, we will talk about classification and importance, followed by major risk categories such as commercial risk, political risk, financial risk, legal risk, and operational risk. Subsequently, we will try to focus on documentation and payment risk. After that, we will try to understand risk assessment and mitigation, followed by insurance and guarantee mechanism. The penultimate topic would be diversification and hedging, and after that, we will conclude our discussion. At the very outset, it is important for us to appreciate the need of understanding risks. We all know that international trade involves multiple stakeholders, multiple jurisdiction and regulatory system. These multiple diverse conditions create uncertainties in the area of international trade. Due to these uncertainties, several risks which are associated with such categories do rise up in the export-import trade. Thus, exporters face diverse risks from order acceptance to payment realization. The 2 points of order acceptance and payment realization involve a lot of activities within these two spots. And all these activities that are between these two spots, they also contain several different types of uncertainties which may create risks for the exporters. We need to determine the effective risk, and whatever risk is identified, it is important for the exporter to manage those risks so that proper trade flourishes and business continuity is maintained. Risk is also associated with the level of profitability. If risks are controlled and managed properly, then the profitability of the exporter will increase. If risks are ignored and proper management is not assessed and taken by the exporter, then the risk may lead to huge losses to the exporter. Managing risk is not avoidance. We cannot avoid any risk in international trade, but it is the strategic preparedness and mitigation. So, we as exporters have to prepare to be ready to deal with the risk. This is the first thing. Second, we should try to mitigate, that is, minimize the impact of the risk. That is second thing. If an exporter thinks that risk can be avoided, then this is not going to happen in international trade. The reason being, there are so many uncertainties in international trade that risk cannot be avoided. For example, between two countries, anytime there can be some level of political conflict. For example, there can be any natural calamity or disaster or accident via maritime sea route. So all these uncertainties do not give way for risk avoidance. The only thing on which exporters should concentrate is the strategic preparedness for the risk as well as mitigation, that is minimization of the risk. Let us now try to understand what is export risk. Export risk is the probability of financial loss or operational disruption during export activities. It is probability, which means it is a kind of estimation about future perspective. Thus, it is not the exact measurement of what is going to happen in the future, but it is an estimation of what problems can pop up in the future, which may lead to some kind of financial loss or operational disruption, etc. Export risks. Export risk arises from uncertainties in markets, finance, logistics, regulations, as well as politics. Means all those facets of national identities, all those facets of businesses that are attached to a particular exporting business creates uncertainties. Also, export risk at every stage of export needs to be identified. Risks are associated at the time of order processing. They are also associated with shipment, with payment realization, and therefore every stage risk is distinct from other stage risks. Thus, for exporter, it is very important to understand and identify the risks which are more for the nature of that exporter. Also, risk management aims to minimize the adverse impact through anticipation and control. The exporters need to anticipate in a better manner as well as to control the risk factors so that risk is minimized, that is mitigated, as well as the strategic preparedness for dealing with such kind of uncertainties do are inculcated in the business operations. Let us now try to understand the importance of risk management in export trade. The first importance is that risk management ensures financial stability and business sustainability. The sustainability of the business means its long-term existence, that the present existence should not be compromised with the future existence. This can only be achieved if risk is properly managed. Thus, it is right to say that risk management ensures financial stability and business sustainability. The second importance is risk management in export trade builds confidence of banks, insurers, and overseas buyers. When we know that in international trade, in export trade, there are uncertainties and every stakeholder knows about it, then what are those things which can build confidence? The banks, financial institutions, buyers, suppliers, all stakeholders look towards the preparedness of the exporter. Means how an exporting business has prepared itself to manage the risk. Thus, risk management policies of any business highlights whether the stakeholders will be confident about the future of the business or not. Thus, risk management plays a very important role in binding the confidence of stakeholders with the exporter. The third importance is that risk management enhances reliability and reputation in international market. Those exporting businesses that have proper risk management, they in their operations show that they minimize the risk of losses. Thus, over a period of time, their profitability is stable and they have been able to deal with the different kind of uncertainties. This indication in turn improves the image of the businesses in the international market, which is the reputation, as well as reliability which creates more trade and repeat trade for the exporters. The fourth important point is risk management reduces probability of defaults, disputes and losses. We all know that there are problems related to default, disputes and losses due to different types of uncertainties. And risk management is trying to deal with these uncertainties, trying to understand these uncertainties and minimize the risk which emerges due to these uncertainty. Thus, the probability of disputes, mismanagement, seizure of goods, etc. is minimized with the application of risk management. The fifth important point is risk management ensures informed decision making and long term competitiveness. We all know that business will be more competitive if it is able to manage risk and understand uncertainties. And that is what is achieved in terms of risk management in export trade. Let us now try to understand what are the different types of export risk. It is important to understand the classification of export risk because based on the classification, the method or the application of risk will be decided. Also, depending on the nature of export business and the size of export business, it will it can be determined that what type of risks are relevant for a specific exporting company. Thus, classification of risks become very important for achieving operational and strategic decision making. The first type of risk is commercial risk. Commercial risk is buyer related risk or market related failures. Means if a risk related to buyer is associated with the exporter, that something untoward happens to the buyer, or it is related to market failure, that the markets where the goods has to be sold has collapsed, then the risks are known as commercial risk. The second type of risk is the financial risk. These risks are associated with credit and liquidity challenges. If somebody has failed to avail credit, that is avail finance, then the risk associated with that will be coming under the financial risk. As well as liquidity challenges, the problems and uncertainties associated with working capital financing will come under financial risk. The third type of export risk is the political risks. These risks include the government actions or political instability which affect trades. For example, wars. If two countries were trading earlier and if they go into war, that will become a political risk. Similarly, risks that are associated with geography along with the political issues are known as geopolitical risks. These risks are also associated with exports and they are relatively new because now in the times of different conflicts which are going on in the world, political risks are also part of geopolitical risk. The next type of risk in export risk is exchange risk. Exchange risks are the risks associated with uncertainties in the fluctuations of foreign currency value or foreign exchange rate. The rapid volatility in the exchange market is associated with different types of uncertainties and payment limitations and bottlenecks. When converted into risk, these become the exchange risk. The next type of risk is legal risk. Legal risks are non-compliance or contractual issues related risk. They arise when exports contracts are not properly met or when in terms of export contract any party has not complied with the clauses and the provisions of the export contract. The next type of export risk is transport and operational risk. Risk associated with physical transportation of the goods, physical losses during transit, delays, seizure of goods, etc. during the time of transit in shipment or air is included under transports and operational risk. The next type and the final type of risk is documentation and compliance risk. These risks are associated to problems and errors such as in bill of lading, letter of credit, etc. and they may also include non-payment of the revenue. Thus, all these export risks are very important to understand to manage these risks as well as to mitigate and minimize these risks for an exporter. Let us now go into the detail of each risk which we have discussed. Commercial risks are where buyer insolvency or refusal to accept goods takes place. It may also arise due to default in payment despite shipment or delivery. For example, if a seller in India is exporting goods to a buyer in USA, United States of America. Commercial risk means the goods have been transited to United States of America. They have reached the destination. Now it is the time that in the post shipment there will be realization of payment. But the client, Mr. Y, sitting in United States of America, has just now, after the goods have arrived at the destination, denied payment. Now this will come under commercial risk, that is refusal to accept goods. He is saying that I am not going to take the goods now and therefore I will not be paying. Now the whole process has completed, the goods have reached the destination, but now such kind of situation is coming up. This creates a lots of problem and this is what is a commercial loss. In other words, commercial loss is the loss which is associated with the business activity. Thus, commercial risk includes commercial loss which is equal to business activities. Also, there can be another way of it, that is default in payment despite shipment or delivery. Another way is cancellation or amendment of order. For example, the same Mr. X is saying that I was supplied with 5,000 units of goods. Now I want amendment. I want a cargo of 7,000 units. Now this will create two problems. One, that because 5,000 has already reached the destination, the payment of 5,000 units will get delayed because now the conditions of trade had amended to 7,000 units. Second, now extra shipping charge will have to be bared for 2,000 units because 2,000 plus 5,000 equal to 7,000 units. This will again create a whole process of documentation for these 2,000 units. Thus, this particular situation also creates commercial risk. Finally, there can be some competitive pressure reducing the export margins or price or demand fluctuations will also create such kind of risks which are commercial risk. Let us now talk about the financial and credit risks. It primarily deals with the inadequate working capital to process orders. We all know that exporters are dependent on cash to cash cycle, which means that they purchase raw materials, buy cash, and then when they sell their goods, they get cash as the payment, which is revenue. But there is a time lag between these two, that when the goods reach the destination, the realization of payment takes some time. So there is a time lag. Now, during that time lag, working capital, which for an exporter can be calculated as current assets minus current liability, is required. This requirement of working capital is to be fulfilled through different type of credit facilities which an exporter can avail. So even if the credit facilities are available, but somehow the exporter is not able to avail the working capital. Thus, the orders will not be processed. So, this will fall under financial and credit risk. Similarly, delays in receiving export finance or credit approvals may also lead to risk. They are also known as financial and credit risk. Third, non-payment due to buyer default or bank refusal under letter of credit terms. If there is any buyer default, that buyer has said that I am not going to pay the amount due to insolvency or any other reason, then again there will be financial and credit risk. Interest rate volatility, which affect the cost of financing. If interest rates have gone up, thus the credit has become more costly now. Therefore, it is an extra burden on the exporter. Therefore, this will give rise to the credit risks. And finally, the cash flow mismatch due to deferred payments also create risks that are known as financial and credit risk. Let us now talk about political and country risk. Political and country risk are associated with the governance mechanism of a country. We have any sudden policy change or trade restrictions. For example, if we take the case of trade between United States of America and China, the trade between the two countries were going smoothly. The two countries are also the G7 countries, the global top 7 countries of the world. They are also, both of them are Security Council members, so both the countries are powerful. Trade was flowing between the two countries peacefully. But when a new president comes in United States of America, then what happens? Then because of that, again, Donald Trump, the president of India, put more tariffs on Chinese imports. Okay, so the tariffs has been increased. Tariff restrictions has been made. And what happens in return? China also has increased more tariffs on United States of America's imports. So this will come under the political risk, because it is because government changes and the policy changes that trade restriction has gone up instead of becoming more easy. Other examples include war, civil unrest, sanctions disrupting shipments. We have example of war, Russia-Ukraine war. You can see how trade has been affected. For example of civil unrest, take countries such as Sri Lanka, few 1 or 2 years back when there was unrest. You can take the example of Bangladesh. There was a civil unrest, and because of which trade has disrupted over there. So companies that were selling goods and importing from Bangladesh have stopped taking orders. That is because of political risk and sanctions. For example, we can say that United States of America has put sanctions on Russia, Iran, etc. So the trade has been affected. So these also comes under the political and country risk. Political and country risk also include the transfer restrictions preventing foreign exchange repatriation. Means sometimes the foreign exchange repatriation means the foreign exchange money being sent to the home country. For example, an Indian firm has exported to a firm in USA. Now, when the payment time comes, the payment will be in dollars. So, if the government puts some restrictions on transfer of dollars from United States to India, then again this will come under political and country risk. Political and country risk also include nationalization or expropriation of foreign assets. And finally, political and country risk are the government intervention in import licensing or approvals. Dear students, let us now focus on exchange rate and foreign exchange risk. Exchange rate fluctuations reduce export earning. First of all, understand how exchange rates are determined. Exchange rates are determined by the demand and supply of the two currencies. And based on the equilibrium price, the exchange rate is determined. Thus, always remember that demand and supply forces of the foreign exchange determines the exchange rate valuation. And this demand and supply relates to the goods and services of those countries. Thus, because of fluctuations in demand and supply of the goods, there is always a fluctuation in the exchange rate, which leads to a kind of risk that is known as foreign exchange risk. There may be adverse movement between invoice and payment date, which means suppose an Indian exporter had to get $200 for goods, that was the payment realization, but and that was mentioned in the invoice. At the time of invoicing, $1 was equal to 70 rupees, for example. But when the transfer is being made, at the time of transferring the payment, $1 is equal to suppose 50 rupees. So how much he would get according to invoice? According to invoice, the total payment is 200 into 70. That is 14,000 rupees. In terms of the market value, what the payment actually is getting, it is 200 into 50, that is 10,000 rupees. So you can see the exporter is getting 4,000 rupees less, that is 14,000 minus 10,000. Now why this is happening? Because of change in the exchange rate. Thus, if the exchange rate depreciates, it is going to have different type of effect. If exchange rate is going to appreciate, it is going to have different types of effects. Thus, the adverse movement between invoice and payment date also create risk. Another way in which exchange rate and foreign exchange risk may arise is the delay in conversion of export proceeds. There may also be difficulty in hedging due to market volatility, and finally, exposure from multi-currency transactions or contracts may also give rise to exchange risks. Dear students, let us now focus on legal and contractual risk. Ambiguity in export contract clauses may lead to legal and contractual risk. Non-compliance with local or international trade laws may also lead to legal and contractual risk. Disputes regarding product quality, delivery, or documentation will also lead to legal and contractual risk, as well as enforcement difficulties under foreign legal system are also going to create risk. There may be penalties due to breach of international commercial term or payment clause, which may be part and parcel of legal and contractual risk. Let us now try to focus on transportation and logistics risk. Transportation and logistic risk deal with loss, damage, or theft of goods in transit. They also include port congestion, strikes, delays in shipping schedule. If there is any mishandling of goods during loading, unloading, or warehousing, there may be losses, and that will also be associated to logistic risk. Inadequate insurance or misdeclared shipment details also leads to transportation and logistic risk. And finally, poor coordination between forwarders, customs, and carriers may also lead to transportation and logistic risk. Dear students, let us now focus on quality and operational risk. The failure to meet buyer's technical specification may lead to quality and operational risk. Technical specification may be some international standards like ISO, like Bureau of International Standards, etc. Also, inadequate quality control or inspection processes leads to quality and operational risk. In addition, substandard packaging leading to product rejection is also a kind of risk that results in losses. Production delays due to equipment or labor shortages is also part and parcel of quality and operational risks. And finally, the supplier non-performance is outsourced. In outsourced production also leads to operational risk. Let us now try to focus on documentation and compliance risk. There are different errors in invoices, letter of credit documents, or certificates in certain cases. If that is the case, there may be certain risks and they are known as documentation risk. If there is any non-adherence to letter of credit or bank documentary requirements, then also it will fall under the documentation risk. Delays in submission of export documentation will fall under the compliance risk. In addition to it, violation of customs or export control regulations will also fall under commercial risk. And finally, the rejection of documents causing delay or forfeited payment also contains the risks that are associated with documentation and compliance. Dear students, let us now try to focus on risk during payment and settlement. The failure of intermediary banks to remit funds comes under the risk during payment and settlement. In addition, rejection of documents by the issuing banks, non-convertibility of currency, or blocked remittance is also part of payment and settlement risk. Fraudulent financial intermediaries or cyber attacks also form part of risk during payment and settlement. And finally, misunderstanding of letter of credit terms or discrepancies in documents also are the examples of risk during payment and settlement. Dear students, let us now try to focus on external agency and market risk. These risks are dependent on third-party service providers, inspectors, brokers, freight forwarders. Failure of external agencies to perform duties or meet timelines also fall part of market risk. Similarly, market saturation or demand contraction in target country is also part of external agency and market risk. Trade barriers, tariffs, or sudden change in import policy is also an example of external agency risk. And increased competition from low-cost global suppliers also contains market risk. Let us now try to understand the different risk assessment and control mechanism. In order to assess risk, the first important thing is to conduct comprehensive pre-contract risk analysis. It includes verification of the buyer's financial standing and trade preferences. In order to do so, letter of credit can be used, and insurance can also act as safeguarding mechanism to protect the payment. There is a requirement to maintain strict quality control and documentation standards in order to have more control mechanism. Under control mechanism, it is also required that the exporter periodically review political, market and financial conditions. Let us now try to focus on role of insurance and guarantee scheme. The Export Credit Guarantee Corporation covers commercial and political risks. Cargo and marine insurance protects goods in transit. There are banks that use guarantees to secure performance and advance payments. Different guarantee schemes by the government also reduces impact of non-payment, losses or disruption. These schemes also encourages banks to extend greater credit to support the exporters in extending contribution in the international trade. Let us now try to focus on risk mitigation through diversification and hedging. This is an important way of minimizing and mitigating risk that the operation may be diversified across different markets. That is, diversified markets, diversified buyers, and diversification of the product range minimizes the risk. There can also be the usage of forward contracts and option to hedge currency risk. In addition to it, spreading shipping schedule and suppliers to reduce dependency is also an important way to mitigate the risk. The exporter should also attempt to maintain contingency funds for unforeseen losses, as well as there should be continuous monitoring of global trade development. Dear students, let us now conclude about what all we have discussed in today's lecture. We have discussed and understood that risk is inherent in every stage of export order processing till the payment realization. We have also appreciated that proactive identification, assessment, and mitigation are essential tools for successful exporting. In addition to it, we have also learned that institutional mechanisms such as ECGC, insurance, and letter of credit strengthen the protection of the exporters. Also, exporters must integrate risk management into daily operations to be more successful, competitive, as well as long-term capability. In the end, it is good to conclude that effective risk control enhances resilience, profitability, and global credibility of the exporters. Dear students, thank you very much for being there with me in this session.